Okay, questions on comparisons. So before that, let me make you understand some, comparison between nouns, comparison between, verbs, right? For example, comparison between nouns. Let me write an example sentence, okay? Here is the typewriter. Huh. Let me write the first one. Okay. X is smaller than Y. What are being compared?
X and Y.
X and Y. Are they nouns or verbs? His name
Nouns.
is X. His name. They are nouns. Nouns have been compared between these two, right? So sometimes you may even find Y is. It is also grammatically correct. That depends on the answer choices. Okay. You may even find out. We may even see X is taller than is Y. This is also correct. These just people are writing as such. And Y is also correct. Okay. So as these the comparison is actually between two nouns, you can simply even leave like this. Is it clear, buddy? Right. So if the two verbs are compared, let's see. I can look after the child better than other. Tell me, what are the things compared? I and my brother?
Yes.
No. Its comparison is actually between, okay, the comparison is, okay, superficially, if you say superficially, yeah, comparison between I and my brother. But to be exact, the comparison is actually between how extent both can look after the child. Right, buddy? Who is better in looking after the child? Got it? The comparison is actually between verbs. Right, buddy? Have you got my point?
Yes.
Okay. What's going on? Chill. I can after the child better than my brother. So basically the comparison is between two verbs. There is a grammatical error even in this, because when the verbs are compared, right, I can look after the child better than my brother look after. My brother looks after. Can you see this, buddy? Because the comparison is actually between verbs, how extent both, can look after the child. Okay, can look after. Frankly speaking, this is how the sentence should be. But to avoid the repetition, you can remove To avoid the repetition of look after, you can remove this verb. Have you understood, Mars?
Yes.
This is grammatically correct sentence. I can look after the child better than my brother can. Now, my brother can do would be much better sentence structure. Can you see this, buddy? This is like, instead of repeating the look after, my brother can look after, you can write do. You can replace it with do. So in this sentence, the verbs have been, compared. Right? So who actually look after the child in a better way? Who is better in looking after the child? Correct, brother?
Okay.
Yeah. So whenever the verbs are compared, you may have to write these sort of phrases in the end or just before it. Right?
Mm-hmm.
These you write in the end. Sometimes you in the options you may even see just before the subject. I can look after the child better than can do my brother. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you may even see like this: do my brother better than can my brother. Do my brother. Something of that sort. Okay? Is it clear, buddy?
Mm-hmm.
Just remember like this: whenever the verbs are compared, you should be able to write the auxiliary verbs in the end or just before the subject. Okay.
Okay.
Now let's understand these questions. What's the answer for the third one? Have you attempted this? Third one.
C.
The rules of written English are more stringent than I need than the rules of the comparison is actually between the rules of spoken English and the rules of written English. Correct? So instead of
Mm-hmm.
repeating the rules, you may simply use than those of spoken English. Correct?
Yes.
And those of spoken English. How about this? Comparison between verbs, buddy.
D.
D. Let's see. Scientists now suspect the imperial mammoths of Pleistocene period were wiped out not by human predation, as were mammoths of Aryan period. Okay. But by sudden and extreme change in the climate. Okay, it gives a sense that these imperial mammoths were wiped out. Let me write the same sentence in simple language, removing the unnecessary stuff for better understanding. Okay. Imperial mammoths wiped out as earlier period mammoths. What's the comparison? Comparison between which quantities?
Mammoths.
Imperial mammoths were mammoths are okay. Imperial mammoths were wiped out as earlier period mammoths. So actually comparison is how both were wiped out. comparison, imperial mammoths were wiped out, and also earlier period mammoths were also wiped out. Right, buddy? So please observe, imperial mammoths of Pleistocene period were wiped out not by human predations as were mammoths of earlier. Okay, they were not wiped out like earlier period mammoths wiped out. This is what it is. So do you think imperial mammoths and also earlier period mammoths were wiped out in the same manner?
No.
No. So earlier period mammoths were actually wiped out, due to human predation. But imperial period mammoths were not wiped out by human predation, but there is another reason: sudden and extreme change in climate. Correct, buddy? Sudden change in climate is the reason for, wiping out of imperial mammoths, right? So earlier period mammoths were actually wiped out by human predation. So on the whole, imperial mammoths were not wiped out as earlier period mammoths. But there is a mistake in this sentence, that is, imperial mammoths were not wiped out as earlier period mammoths were wiped out. The comparison is between how the both were wiped out, no? Clear? Mass. Okay. So imperial mammoths were not wiped out as earlier period mammoths were wiped out. This is what on the whole. So instead of repeating it, right, you can eliminate this. You need not to repeat wiped out again. And were can be written as a part of, as in the middle of the sentence, were should be written just before, as were earlier period mammoths. Is it clear, buddy?
Yes.
So now it is actually exactly correct. Now you can say this is a correct sentence and correct comparison, right? Imperial mammoths were not wiped out as were earlier period mammoths. So please observe, if this is the correct answer, which option is correct?
Oh. A.
A is the right one. Correct. Right, buddy. So scientists now suspect the imperial mammoths of Pleistocene period. Just remove this. Okay, again, these are also imperial mammoths, but earlier periods. Imperial mammoths of Pleistocene period. And these are imperial mammoths of earlier periods. Imperial mammoths of Pleistocene period were not wiped out as were imperial mammoths of earlier period mammoths. Now this is correct. So these are actually so cool. Imperial mammoths were wiped out. We have not here, no? Wiped out as were mammoths of earlier periods. So this not must be written here. Imperial mammoths were not wiped out as were earlier period mammoths. Again, they are also imperial mammoths, but they are belonging to earlier periods. That's it. Is it clear, buddy? Whenever you are comparing two nouns, you can use like also. But whenever you are comparing verbs, you can't use like. You have to use as only. Got my point, buddy? Better than,
Yes.
less than, as much as. Right? They can be used. But like is always useful to compare to nouns only. Like is useful to compare nouns only. Right? His shirt is exactly like mine. That's okay. Right, buddy? Nouns can be compared making use of like. His shirt is exactly as mine. That's also okay. Right, buddy? So I can look after the child exactly like my brother does. That's wrong. I can look after the child exactly as my brother does. My brother can. You must use because the comparison between verbs, right, buddy?
Yes.
Mas. That's why you should not use like. So as is always useful to compare, as can be used to compare either nouns and verbs, but like is useful only to compare nouns. Got it?
Okay.
Now how about this?
C.
Have you attempted this?
Yeah.
Let me check. Scientists have found that skin tissue is more resistant to toxic substances than more than lung tissue. Okay. So this skin tissue uses sweat glands to protect the immune system from possible invaders. Scientists found that the skin tissue is more resistant to toxic substances than lung tissue. So lung tissue is might be we might require is. I don't see any mistake in it. Lung tissue is more resistant to skin tissue more resistant to toxic substances than is. We have is here. You have to keep this. More accurate, nobody. Lung tissue is. Skin tissue is resistant to toxic substances more so than something is wrong. More so than. Why do we need more so than? More so than, more so than. Can you find any phrase like this? Have you ever used more so than kind of phrases? Mars. Which option have you picked?
C.
So there is a wrong phrase, right? But have you ever used more so than? Unnecessary comma. Skin tissue is resistant to toxic substances more so than. At least there it must be more than, right?
Yes.
Okay. The resistance of the skin tissue to the, oh my god, he is completely changing the meaning. The resistance of the thin skin tissue. So right option is B, accurate. Because we got is here. She's taller than I am. Basically, you can say she is taller than I. For better accuracy, you can say she is taller than I am. When you write this sentence as a part of a big sentence, am should be just before I. She is taller than am I. Have you got my point, Mars?
Yes.
Yeah. So finally, idioms. There are idioms. Please attempt these idiom questions at home. We will discuss them tomorrow. Let me do the first one for you, okay? The rest of the question, the remaining question must be attempted by you. Right. Let me do the first one for you for better understanding. The establishment of, it's actually idiom. Idiom means fixed phrases, buddy. Neither nor, either or, not only but also. Any fixed phrase should be considered idiom. Any phrase which is not giving direct sense, which is giving indirect sense, that can also considered is idiom. If you say turn down, it's a phrasal verb, can also be used as, can also be considered idiom because it is not giving direct meaning. Turn down. Turn down means decline, reject. The organization turned down my application, declined my application, rejected my application. Turn and down. Individual meanings nowhere near to declining, rejecting. Right, buddy? But if by you know, if you go with the turn down as a phrase, as a word, as a phrasal verb, It is giving a different sense, so it can be considered idiom again. Okay, any expression which is giving implicit sense, that can also be considered. Any fixed phrase, defined will always go with as. If you use defined as in a sentence, you have used idiom. Considered never go with any preposition. Considered should be to be. You may go with considered to be or considered. That's it. Okay.
Okay.
He considered himself as a head of this department, as was wrongly used in that sentence. He considered himself head of the department. You should not use consider as. As never go with consider. If you really want to go with regard, he regards himself as a head of the department. Regard as is equal to consider. You should never use as again along with the consider, because consider itself has a meaning like regard as. Maz, is it clear?
Yeah.
So they are called idioms. Let's understand the establishment of land trust in New England has been praised not because of it restricting overdevelopment, but because it allows the inheritance by future generations of the property. Okay, not because of it. Not because of it. There is a problem with because of. After because of, you need to write restricting. Not because of restricting. Not because of you never use any subject. Because of my illness. Because of restricting or development, something of that sort. Immediately after because of, you never get any pronoun. There is a problem with this. Eliminate A. Not because, or else you can remove off also. Not because it is restricting or development, but because it allows something of that sort. Because it not only is restricting, it is not only restricting. Maybe intended meaning is to, not only but also. You should be able to recognize the idiom, that is not only but also. But not only was wrong, wrong was used in wrong place. It is not only restricting. For example, he was not only late for the interview but also dressed inappropriately. Not only was used just before verb. This not only must be used just before verb, restricting. Okay, because it is not only restricting overdevelopment, but there is no but also. Eliminate it. Because it does not only restrict, it does not only restrict. Why we need does again? Overdevelopment, it also, but is missing. Not only but also is the fixed phrase, right, Maz?
Mm-hmm.
You can't see in the three options the standard phrase not only but also. Because of not only but, because of again, because not only but also could make sense. Not only because it restricts overdevelopment, but also because it allows, yes, is the best one. You have to use not only either just before restrict or before, at the beginning of the sentence. Either at the beginning of the sentence or just before the verb. Is it clear, Mars?
Yes.
Okay. So please attempt the rest of the questions. How many questions are there? There are only 2 questions left. Okay.
Okay.
Please finish these 2, and also I'm going to give you some more questions to attempt. Okay.
Okay.